My name is Pastor Cornelius Adeyemi. I am a 58-year-old senior pastor from Lagos, Nigeria, leading a congregation of 4,000 in Houston, Texas for the past 14 years. I have preached over 3,000 sermons. I have buried the dead, married the living, counseled the broken, and built an institution that by every visible metric is a success. On a Tuesday morning in April, my heart stopped for 10 minutes in a hospital corridor. And the message I received about what comes next in 2026 will permanently alter how you understand what God is doing with the church right now. Please subscribe to this channel. This message was not given to a pastor to keep in a pulpit. #1. The Sunday morning, he preached his last sermon without knowing it, 300 words. Let me tell you what Sunday morning looks like when you are a senior pastor of a 4,000-member congregation in Houston, Texas. It does not look like prayer and contemplation in the way that people who are not pastors imagine it does. It looks like logistics. 3 services, 8:30, 11, and 1:30. A production team managing lights, sound, and live streaming to 47 countries. A sermon prepared on Wednesday that has been revised 4 times since then in response to events in the congregation, the nation, and the specific moving of something interior that pastors learn to pay attention to and rarely admit they don't fully understand. My associate, Pastor Theo, knocked on my office door at 7:45 that Sunday. "You ready?" he said. "I was born ready," I said. It is what I say every Sunday. It is the ritual of a man who has learned that rituals of confidence become genuine over time. "You look tired," he said. "I look like a man who has been preparing a sermon since Wednesday," I said. "Same thing," he said. "I preached 3 services. The message was on John 11, the raising of Lazarus. I had preached that passage 11 times in 30 years and found something new in it every time, which is one of the reliable mysteries of a text that is older than my tradition and deeper than my comprehension. After the 3rd service, a woman named Sister Gloria stopped me in the corridor. "Pastor, are you all right?" she said. "I am fine," I said. The standard pastoral response. "You preached like a man saying goodbye today," she said. I looked at her. "I preached the text," I said. She held my gaze for a moment. "Yes," she said. "You did." 3 days later, I understood what she had perceived. The hospital visit on Tuesday was routine, or as routine as pastoral hospital visits ever are, which is to say that they carry their own specific weight regardless of familiarity. A church of 4,000 generates a consistent pastoral need. There is always someone in a hospital bed. There is always a family waiting in a corridor for news they have not yet received. There is always a moment where a pastor walks into a room and is expected to bring something from outside the room that the room desperately needs. I had made this kind of visit approximately 600 times in 14 years of Houston ministry. I visited 3 members that Tuesday morning. A deacon recovering from hip surgery. A young mother in the oncology ward whose diagnosis had arrived 2 weeks earlier and whose faith was doing what faith does in the earliest stages of a crisis, holding, but with visible effort. A teenager in pediatrics whose parents were in the particular exhaustion of the 3rd week of a long admission. I walked the corridors between these visits with the accumulated weight of all 3 encounters sitting in my chest the way pastoral weight sits, not crushing, but present. Substantial. The weight of genuinely held concern for people you genuinely love in circumstances that genuinely require more than you are able to provide. Theo had asked me once, "Where do you put it?" After a day like this, where does the weight go? "I take it home," I had said honestly, "and I give it back to the Lord before sleep." "And if it doesn't go?" he had asked. I had not answered that question directly. I was walking the corridor between the oncology ward and the exit when the Tuesday morning made a different decision about my schedule. Cardiac arrest. In a hospital corridor. There is a specific irony available in that fact that I have had significant time to consider. A man who has spent 30 years preaching about eternity, who has stood at bedsides and gravesides and delivered with conviction the assurance of what lies beyond this life, who has counseled the dying and the bereaved with a theological confidence that, if I am being honest in the way that only a near-death experience can make you honest, contained more certainty in its delivery than in its foundation. That man collapsed in a hospital corridor, where the response was immediate, where the medical infrastructure that saves lives was present within 90 seconds, where a nurse named Pamela performed compressions with the specific efficiency of someone for whom this is Tuesday morning and not a theological crisis. She told me afterward in my hospital room, professional, kind, slightly amused by the situation's particular irony, "You were in the right place." "God's sense of humor," I said. She smiled. Something's sense of humor. From the outside, the event lasted 10 minutes. From my side, the corridor, the weight of the 3 pastoral visits, the accumulated 30 years of preaching about exactly this moment, stepped back with the specific completeness of a curtain being drawn aside rather than a curtain falling. Not ending, opening. And what was on the other side of the opening made everything I had preached about not wrong, but so much smaller than the reality that I understood immediately why every mystic who has ever encountered genuine transcendence has struggled to bring it back into language. Language is for the maps. I was no longer looking at the map. I was inside the territory. I need to say this carefully. Because I am a pastor, words are my primary instrument. I have used language for 30 years to describe realities I believed in completely and had not yet personally verified. What I arrived in made me understand the difference between believing in something and standing inside it with the totality of your consciousness. I had preached about the presence of God approximately 3,000 times. I arrived in the presence of God and understood that my 3,000 sermons had been sincere, careful, scripturally grounded, and also approximately the way a photograph of the ocean described swimming in it. "Oh," I said, "not as eloquence, as the only available response to comprehension that exceeds the comprehension apparatus." "This is what I have been pointing out," I said. And the place confirmed what I said with the specific quality of something that has been patiently waiting for a particular person to arrive and finally see it directly rather than through description. "Yes," came the understanding. This is what the sermons were pointing toward. "I should have told them it was this large," I said. "You were telling them with what you had," came the response. "Now you will tell them with what you know." I stood in that. Stood is insufficient, but is the only word, and felt 30 years of pastoral ministry arrive at its context. Not completed. Contextualized. The sermons were not wrong. They were early. They were the finger pointing at the moon. I was standing on the moon. And the presence arrived not from outside, but from within everything that was already present, the way the sun is not separate from the light it produces. He arrived knowing my entire ministry, not the public version, not the 3,000 sermons and the 4,000 members and the 47 countries of the live stream and the 14 years of Houston ministry building that by every external metric constitutes a successful pastoral career. The interior version. Every sermon I had preached with complete conviction. And every sermon I had preached through a private doubt I had managed into a delivery that concealed the doubt from the congregation while I maintained, with professional discipline, the appearance of certainty that pastoral authority seemed to require. "You know who this is," he said. "Yes," I said. And the yes came from a place that had no professional composure attached to it. No pastoral delivery. No 30 years of practice in speaking about this person to audiences. Just yes. Bare. Complete. Prior to performance. Every word, he said. Not accusation. Not evaluation. The completeness of being known. The doubts, too. I said. Especially the doubts, he said. I felt something release at that. I thought the doubts were failure, I said. The doubts, he said, were honesty. The management of the doubts into sermons that didn't include them, that is what requires examination. I concealed my uncertainty from my congregation, I said. You concealed it from everyone, he said, including yourself eventually. Is that why I am here? I said. You're here, he said, because there is a message that needs to be delivered to the church in this season. And it requires someone who is led from the inside of the institution and has been honest enough at this moment to receive it without defending the institution. I'm listening, I said. You always were, he confirmed. That was always your best quality. Before the 5 messages, he said something. I wrote it on the notepad Theo brought me in the hospital room on my second day. He had brought it for pastoral notes. I always work on sermon material even in hospital, a habit my wife Aginola has described as both admirable and deeply concerning depending on her mood. I used it for something different this time. He said, the church you have been building and the church I am building are not always the same church. And 2026 is the year that distinction becomes impossible to maintain. I sat with that. How are they different? I asked. The church you have been building, he said, is organized around the Sunday service, around attendance and membership and giving and program, around the visible metrics of institutional health. That church is what I was trained to build, I said. I know, he said, not as accusation, as acknowledgement. The church I am building, he said, is organized around genuine transformation, around the specific, costly, private, invisible work of people becoming more fully what they were made to be. The two are not always in conflict, I said. No, he confirmed. Sometimes they move together. The institution serves the transformation. The visible metrics are downstream of the invisible work. And when they diverge, I said, the institution begins to serve its own continuation rather than the transformation, he said. And the people who are genuinely seeking transformation begin to feel the divergence as a hunger that the Sunday service is not feeding. They leave, I said. Or they stay and go quiet, he said. Which is worse, I said. Yes, he confirmed. Which is why 2026 is a year of necessary disruption. Show me the 5 messages, I said. Before the 5 messages, he said, understand the frame. Give it to me, I said. 2026, he began, is not a year of revival in the way your tradition uses that word. Revival in the popular usage implies the restoration of something that was previously present and has been lost. More attendance, more excitement, more of what the institution recognizes as success. That is not what is coming, I said, feeling the direction. What is coming, he said, is a reconstruction. And reconstruction is different from revival in a specific way. Revival works with the existing structure, I said. Reconstruction sometimes requires removing what cannot hold the new design. Yes, he confirmed. And the people who love the existing structure more than they love what the structure was built to serve, they will experience 2026 as loss. And the people who love what the structure was built to serve? I asked. Will experience 2026 as clarification, he said. A stripping away of what was never the point to reveal what always was. Both groups will be in pain, I said. Yes, he confirmed. The pain of loss and the pain of clarification are different kinds of pain. But they're both real. What does a pastor do with that? I asked. A pastor in 2026, he said, must be honest about which group they are in. Because a pastor who loves the institution more than the transformation will lead their congregation into resistance. And a pastor who loves the transformation will lead their congregation through the reconstruction. I need to know which one I am, I said. You already know, he said. That is why the question is difficult, he confirmed. Show me the 5 messages, I said, and I will find the courage for the answer. The first message, he said, is structural. Tell me, I said. The institutional church, as currently configured, he began, is carrying a weight it was not designed to carry. Not the weight of genuine ministry. That weight is sustainable when the structure is sound. The weight of institutional self-perpetuation. The weight of a model that requires constant growth in attendance, revenue, and visibility to feel secure. The mega-church model, I said. Not exclusively, he said. Every church that has organized its health metrics around institutional growth rather than genuine transformation. Large, medium, and small. What happens to that weight in 2026? I asked. The people carrying it, he said, reach their limit simultaneously. Not by coordination. By the natural conclusion of a process that has been building for years. Pastoral burnout at scale, I said. More than burnout, he said. A collective recognition among the people most invested in the institutional model that the investment is not producing what they entered ministry to produce. Pastors waking up to the gap, I said. Between what they are building and why they started building, he confirmed. And when that recognition becomes widespread? I asked. The rebuilding becomes possible, he said. Because the people who have been holding the existing structure in place through sheer will and institutional loyalty reach the point where the will is exhausted. The structure becomes available for reconstruction, I said. The floor becomes visible, he said, when everything built on it that was not load-bearing is removed. What is load-bearing? I asked. Genuine community, he said. Honest prayer. Real transformation of real people. The specific work of one human being helping another human being become more fully themselves. That has always been load-bearing, I said. It is the only thing that is, he confirmed. The second message, he said, is personal. For the pastors. Tell me, I said. The pastors who move through 2026 with integrity, he began, will emerge from it in a form that their congregations and they themselves will not fully recognize. Changed by the reconstruction, I said. Changed by what the reconstruction requires of them, he confirmed. Which is the single most difficult thing the pastoral role has ever asked. What is it? I asked. Honesty about their own condition, he said. Not the managed transparency of a pastor who shares enough personal struggle to appear relatable while maintaining the fundamental authority of someone who has more together than their congregation. Real honesty, I said. The specific honesty, he said, of a leader who says, I have been exhausted for 3 years, and I told no one. I have been carrying doubt I did not preach. I have been building something I am no longer certain is what I was called to build. I have been performing certainty I do not feel. A congregation cannot receive that from a pastor, I said. Reflexively, why not? He said. I paused. Because it destabilizes their faith, I said. Or, he said, it gives them permission to be honest about their own condition, which stabilizes their faith in a way that performed pastoral certainty cannot. A pastor's honest doubt, I said slowly, is more faith-building than a pastor's managed certainty. Because genuine faith, he said, is not the absence of doubt. It is the choice to move forward in the presence of doubt. I have been modeling certainty instead of faith, I said. Many have, he confirmed. The pastors who survived 2026, he said, will have modeled something more honest and more useful and unrecognizable to a tradition that conflated certainty with leadership, I said. The third message, he said, is the one most pastors are most afraid to receive. Tell me, I said. The people leaving your churches, he said. The ones your attendance metrics register as losses. The ones you describe in staff meetings as dechurched or spiritually drifting or casualties of culture. Yes, I said. Most of them, he said, are not leaving faith. I felt that land. Tell me more, I said. They are leaving a version of faith that was not feeding the real thing in them, he said. They are leaving programs that address the surface without touching the interior. They are leaving communities that required them to perform a version of spiritual health they did not feel. They are leaving the institution, I said. Not the faith. Most of them, he confirmed. And the tragedy is not that they left. The tragedy is that the institution responded to their leaving by questioning their faith rather than examining the institution's adequacy. We made the leaving their problem, I said. Yes, he said. When the leaving was information. Information about what? I asked. About what genuine seeking people need, he said. That the institution was not providing. That genuine community cannot be produced by a service model. That real spiritual transformation requires real relationship. Real honesty. Real time. Things that don't scale to 4,000, I said. Things that don't scale easily beyond the size where every person knows every other person, he confirmed. And the people who left, I said. Where are they? Many of them, he said, are in small groups. In living rooms. In conversations over coffee that are doing more genuine spiritual formation than most Sunday services. They found the church outside the church, I said. They found what the church was always meant to be, he confirmed. The fourth message, he said, is the one that will be most misunderstood. Tell me, I said. Revival is coming, he said. I felt something stir in me at that. 30 years of preaching about revival. Praying for revival. The specific hunger of a pastor who has stood at the altar call of every significant revival movement of his generation and believed, genuinely believed, that the next one was imminent. What kind? I asked. Not the kind that fills stadiums, he said. I paused. Then what kind? I asked. The kind that fills kitchens, he said, and hospital rooms, and prison visiting areas, and the specific conversations that happen between two people in ordinary circumstances when one of them is honest enough to say what is actually happening in their life. Small revival, I said. Distributed revival, he corrected, which is not smaller than stadium revival. It is larger, because it is not dependent on a platform or a personality or a production budget. It cannot be controlled, I said. Or marketed, he confirmed. Or branded, I said. The revival coming in 2026, he said, will not have a name or a face or a headquarters. It will not produce a movement with a logo. It will produce transformed people in ordinary places through ordinary means without announcement. How will anyone know it's happening? I asked. The same way you know spring is happening, he said. Not by watching the weather report, by walking outside and feeling the temperature change, by seeing what is growing. Person by person, I said. Transformation by transformation, he confirmed. And the institutions that try to claim it, I said, will miss it, he replied, because it will not come through them. It will come to spite them and around them, I said. And through the ones willing to get out of its way, he confirmed. The fifth message, he said, is about the generation behind yours. Tell me, I said. The leaders emerging in 2026, he said, will not look like the leaders your tradition trained and recognized and elevated. How will they look different? I asked. They will lead from wounds, he said, not from stages. I sat with that. Explain the distinction, I said. A leader from a stage, he said, leads from above. from the position of someone who has arrived somewhere their audience is still moving toward. Their authority comes from the gap between their apparent position and the congregation's position. The elevation model, I said. The next generation of genuine leaders, he said, will lead from beside, from within, from the specific position of someone who is in the same difficulty as the people they are leading and who is being honest about it. Their wounds are their authority, I said. Not because suffering is inherently authoritative, he said, but because a generation that has been saturated with performed leadership recognizes genuine experience immediately. They can smell performance, I said. They have been raised in it, he confirmed. They have watched a generation of leaders perform certainty, perform health, perform success. They are not interested in the performance. They want the real version, I said. A leader who says, I have been where you are, he said, and I am still moving, and here is what the moving actually costs. That leader has authority with this generation that no platform or credential can produce. The wounded healer, I said. Not as metaphor, he confirmed. As actual leadership model. My generation built platforms, I said. The next one, he said, will dismantle them. And led from the floor, I said. Where the work has always actually happened, he confirmed. Tell me about prayer, I said. Because prayer is the infrastructure of everything we have been discussing, he said. And the version of prayer most churches are practicing is not adequate to what 2026 requires. What version are most churches practicing? I asked. Prayer as performance, he said. Prayer as the public exercise of spiritual confidence. The eloquent pastoral prayer that demonstrates theological literacy and faith vocabulary. The corporate prayer that sounds like faith but operates like a script. I have led thousands of those prayers, I said. Yes, he confirmed. And some of them were genuine underneath the performance. But the performance layer, the requirement that prayer sound a certain way, that it demonstrate a certain level of confidence and spiritual authority, that layer frequently prevents the real prayer from reaching its destination. Because the real prayer, I said slowly, is underneath the performance. The real prayer, he said, is the thing the pastor is actually feeling that they are managing into a more acceptable form for public delivery. What would happen, I asked, if a pastor stood at the pulpit and prayed what they actually felt? In most congregations, he said, it would be the most significant pastoral moment of the last decade. I felt that land. 2026, he said, is when enough pastors reach the point of exhaustion where the performance layer becomes too heavy to maintain. And the real prayer comes out, I said. And the congregation, starved for genuine encounter, responds to the reality in a way they have never responded to the performance, he confirmed. The prayer that sounds like weakness, I said, is the prayer that reaches further than the prayer that sounds like strength, he confirmed. Because it is actually going somewhere, he said, rather than performing the journey. Tell me about pastoral suffering, I said. Because it is the subject most absent from the sermons of pastors who are suffering, I said. Yes, he confirmed. What do pastors need to understand about their own suffering? I asked. First, he said, that it is real. This sounds obvious. It is not. A culture of pastoral performance has produced pastors who do not fully believe their own suffering is legitimate. Because suffering implies something is wrong, I said. And a successful pastor is not supposed to have things that are wrong. Yes, he confirmed. The pastoral success narrative, the growing church, the expanding ministry, the platform, the influence, creates a context in which genuine pastoral suffering has nowhere to be named. Because naming it would undermine the narrative. So pastors suffer privately, I said. And Counsel is suffering, he confirmed. With isolation, with the specific additional weight of carrying suffering that cannot be shared because sharing it would cost the institution credibility. Second, he said, Pastoral suffering is not evidence of spiritual failure. A pastor who is genuinely in the middle of ministry that costs them, that requires more than they have, that exposes their limits, that brings them repeatedly to the place of inadequacy, is in precisely the position where genuine ministry occurs. Strength made perfect in weakness, I said. The scripture arriving automatically. Not as a comfort offered to suffering pastors, he said. As a structural description of how genuine ministry actually operates. The inadequacy is the mechanism, I said. The place where the pastor's resources end, he confirmed, is the place where genuine power begins. But only if the pastor is honest about the ending. Not managing it into a testimony, I said. Living it as the current reality, he confirmed. Give me the message for burned-out pastors, I said. Specifically, the ones who are reading this at midnight, who have a Sunday service in 6 days and nothing left to give it. I know those pastors, he said. I am one of those pastors, I said. I know, he replied. Tell me what they need to hear, I said. He gave it without decoration. First, he said, what you are feeling is not spiritual failure. It is the honest response of a genuine human being to an unsustainable demand. Stop calling it a faith problem. It is a structural problem. Second, he said, the congregation does not need what you have been performing. They need what you actually have, which on a burned-out Tuesday night might be very little. Say that. You will be surprised what genuine honesty produces in people who have been receiving performance. Third, he said, stop building and start being. For a season. Not forever. But the next thing your ministry requires is not a new program or a new series or a new initiative. It is a pastor who has stopped performing and started living. Fourth, he said, tell someone the truth about your condition. Not a curated version. The actual version. A colleague. A trusted deacon. Your spouse if you have one and have not already made them carry too much. The isolation is killing something that conversation would heal. Fifth, he said, rest is not dereliction. It is preparation. The pastor who has collapsed and recovered knows something about the congregation that the pastor who has never collapsed cannot access. The experience of meeting, I said. Yes, he confirmed. You will preach that experience, he said, better than anything you have preached from strength. Because it will be true, I said. Because it will be yours, he confirmed. The 5 messages were complete. I had the framework, the content, the specific pastoral application, the message I would carry back. And then he turned from the showing to me. Cornelius, he said. Yes, I said. Why did you become a pastor? He asked. I had answered this question in ordination interviews and biographical profiles and anniversary celebration programs and conversations with seminary students considering ministry. I had the formed answer, the calling narrative, the moment at 17 when the conviction arrived and the direction became clear. He was not asking for that. The actual answer, he said. I went inward honestly. The actual answer. I wanted to matter, I said. Quietly. For the first time. To whom? He said. To everyone, I said. To God. To my Father who told me I would never amount to anything. To the church that gave me the first community I had ever felt I belonged to. To myself, eventually. And the ministry, he said, has given me all of that, I said. The significance. The belonging, the evidence that I was wrong about my father's assessment. And it has also, he said, required something of you. Everything, I said. 30 years, he said. Everything. Yes, I said. And underneath the everything, he said, what remains? I searched honestly. Exhaustion, I said. An exhaustion I have never named to anyone. Not to Aginola. Not to Theo. Not to any of the 3,000 sermons. Not even to me? He said. I felt the question arrive in the specific place where the truth I had been managing for 30 years lived. I didn't think you wanted to hear about exhaustion, I said. Cornelius, he said. Gently. Completely. That is exactly what I have been waiting to hear. Pamela, the nurse, found me returning. She was checking my vitals when I opened my eyes in the hospital corridor. They had not moved me far, the collapse having been witnessed and responded to at the efficiency of a hospital environment. And she looked at my face with the professional assessment of someone reading a patient. Welcome back, she said. Thank you for the work you did, I said. It's my job, she said. It was my life, I said. So thank you more than the job. She smiled. Theo arrived 20 minutes later. He sat in the plastic chair beside my hospital bed with his elbows on his knees and his hands clasped and his face carrying the specific expression of a man who has been frightened and is managing the aftermath. You scared the whole building, he said. I know, I said. You need to rest, he said. I'll cover Sunday. Yes, I said. He looked at me. That's the first time in 14 years you've agreed to that without an argument, he said. I know, I said. Something happened, he said. Not a question. Everything happened, I said. Tell me, he said. I looked at him, Theo, who had been beside me for 14 years, who had covered my gaps and managed my intensity and maintained his own faith quietly and consistently through the specific difficulty of serving alongside a pastor who had never been fully honest about his own condition. I will tell you everything, I said. But first I need to say something I should have said years ago. What? He said. I have been exhausted for a very long time, I said. And I am sorry I carried it alone. He held my gaze. I knew, he said quietly. I know, I said. Tell me anyway, he replied. I stepped down from the senior pastorate 8 months after the hospital corridor. Not permanently. Not in defeat. With the specific intentionality of a man who has received a message, he cannot deliver from the position he was occupying. Theo is the senior pastor now. He is doing it differently than I did. Better in certain ways. More honest. More willing to show his process to the congregation rather than his conclusions. The congregation is smaller. 3,040 rather than 4,012. Some people left when the leadership changed and the Sunday production values reduced, and the pastoral voice became more uncertain and more real simultaneously. The ones who stayed are different. I watched them from the second row. I sat in the congregation for the first time in my adult life and discovered that it looks completely different from this angle, and I see people doing something they were not doing before. Genuine things. I wrote this because 2026 is arriving. And every burned-out pastor at their desk at midnight composing a sermon they are not sure they believe deserves to know that the exhaustion they are hiding is not a secret from the one they are preaching about. And that the honesty they are afraid will destroy their ministry will actually be the beginning of the ministry they started this work to build. The church is being rebuilt from the floor up. The floor has always been genuine relationship, genuine prayer, genuine honesty about the human condition, including the pastors. The Sunday performance is ending. The actual work is beginning. And the pastors who survive this season will be unrecognizable to the pastors they were. In exactly the way that matters. Pastor Cornelius Adeyemi, Houston, Texas.